Hey everybody, today we're going to be talking about the Death Slinger. Back in the day I remember hearing they were adding another ranged killer to the game, and I couldn't quite expect them to... Okay, this isn't gonna work. I'm too married to the idea of doing these in order. Damn my stubborn wishes for continuity. Can you blame me for being intimidated though? Doctor is one of the most infamously complex killers to talk about. Not the most complex to play, but the most complex to understand as a whole. He's got two abilities, a unique status effect with several levels of intensity, a bunch of ultra transformative add-ons that make his power inflict new and specific problems onto people, and an ability blurb that goes off the top of the screen in-game. We have a lot to cover today, but hell, all jokes aside, I'm excited to talk about something so meaty and rich with moving parts.
Is it my bedside manner? Jennifer, it's time to take your medicine.
Try some of your own medicine.
So, back in the day, Doctor was a stance change character. You could swap between a mode where you could hurt things directly and a mode where you could blast people with electricity to cause bad shit to happen, which also had this sort of strange overtime effect that stretched over your terror radius. I don't have much reason to bring this up, I just thought the old design was cool, but a bit hard to make work. It was obviously created at a time when the people developing this game were afraid to make killers that used more than 2 buttons to do their thing. We are now in modern Dead by Daylight. We use as many buttons as we damn please. So now Doctor is a bit more conventional, but no less complicated. Alright, your main ability is a cone of electricity that you project in front of you. It starts small where you're standing and gets wider by the end of the cone. It has a sizable area of effect for what it is, but you kinda have to treat it like a mid-range option. It is visualized by the electricity welling up from the ground when you fire it off. It isn't entirely stuck to the ground, and you can hit people that are a little bit above and below where it shows up. This is just to give a good idea of who will be blasted at a quick glance. It goes through walls too. You can use this to track people super easily, given that every time someone is hit by your electricity, they scream. This isn't going to tell you someone's exact location most of the time, but it can give some good information about who's behind an obstruction, if anybody. It has a somewhat quick charge up that slows you down and has a separate charge up after it casts and before it detonates. There's sort of a timing you gotta get down, but it all in all is a very simple and straightforward way to stack madness on survivors. Don't worry, we'll get to that pile of mechanics later. All you gotta know about shock therapy as an ability is that it makes survivors scream, causes half a stack of madness, so you gotta hit it twice to make their brains level up, is extremely spammable, can't hit people in lockers, and at max stacks it can still make survivors scream so you can interrupt and prevent several actions. Yeah, that's all you gotta know. Like, okay, that last part is actually pretty important. If someone is on a generator, they will scream and stop repairing. And on top of that, they won't be able to touch it again for 2.5 seconds. This applies to most things. If they are gonna try to vault or do a pallet drop and you shock them, they won't be able to actually perform the action for, again, 2.5 seconds. The timing on interrupting is trivial, but that isn't really the case for preventing actions. Like, you have to act immediately if you want to capitalize on someone being unable to touch stuff. When it works very well. This is how you are going to be making people go nuts trying to lose you in a chase, figuratively and literally. This is just one of 2 ways to induce madness on people. The other way is Static Blast, a positively humongous ability in scale that has a long build-up before sending out an explosion of electricity that matches the size of your terror radius. Like, if your terror radius is mechanically bigger or smaller than normal, then your Static Blast will also be that big or small. If you use Dark Devotion or Unforeseen, perks that tack your terror radius to survivors and generators respectively, then your blast comes from those spots specifically. If you have Undetectable, your terror radius is non-existent, and the static blast won't do anything but waste your time. It's incredibly customizable. When someone is caught in this sonic boom, they scream and go up a whole madness level. This is your ultimate I want to find people move. It has a significant cooldown of a whole minute, Jesus. And people inside lockers are, again, not affected. But it is a massive interrupt that forces survivors to give away their position. Between shock therapy, letting you know where a survivor is in a sizable cone, and static shock revealing several survivors no matter what they're doing, the Doctor is the ultimate anti-stealth killer in Dead by Daylight. No matter how sneaky someone is, no matter how much they hide their aura from you, no matter how much they make their voice quiet and their scratch marks inconsistent, you will find them somehow. Sure, Calm Spirit kind of fucks you up since it makes survivors unable to scream. But hey, if you're paying attention to the madness of your survivors, you might be able to realize someone is there that might not be making noise. Speaking of madness, let's jump right into this nightmare, shall we? The status effect so complex and full of shit it does that it has a page on the wiki all to itself separate from the blurb about it on the killer's main page. If you mostly play killer like I do, you might not even know what this does. It makes Doctor one of the most survivor-facing killers since he inflicts something he doesn't even usually see happening. He just has to agree with the game that it's working and doing something. It is your endgame as Doctor to get people as mad as possible, though. There are 3 levels of madness. Let's go through them in order, as opposed to randomly choosing 1 through 3, I guess. Level 1 madness looks like this in the survivor HUD and is obnoxious, but not the end of the world for survivors. When a survivor reaches this level, they scream and give away their position. This happens with every madness level, so I guess I should just consider this a blanket statement among madness tiers. The main thing level 1 does is cause a small chance for skill checks to be awful. This is a madness skill check. They can suck to deal with. Every madness level has them, and they get more and more common as you get more crazy. At level 1, they have a 33% chance of happening, so a third of the skill checks you encounter as a survivor will probably be these. They can be off-center, go in reverse, or have both at once. This won't mess up seasoned survivors who have dealt with skill checks to the point where they can hit greats every time like it's nothing, but it's still awful to deal with, especially when mixed with other skill check issue-causing perks. Also, frankly, the average survivor is gonna at least have to spend a little more brain power dealing with these. Level 2 looks like this and comes with 2 issues. First of all, 66% Doctor skill check chance. That is pretty significant, and again, synergies. Survivors also start seeing hallucinations of the Doctor standing there menacingly. These are pretty disorienting. They don't carry a terror radius or anything, but they can just show up and make a survivor second guess. It is above all else just a fun way to freak survivors out and never let them feel safe. These 2 levels have been a little weird to deal with, but not impossible. Level 3 takes off the kid gloves. Level 3 looks like this and has a whole laundry list of problems it causes survivors. For one, survivors affected with level 3 brain rot screen on their own intermittently. You could be down on your luck, not sure where anyone is, and then suddenly, boom, someone has a brain cramp from across the map. The hallucinations of false doctors are also increased in volume, making them show up and reposition way more often. That's not all though. You as Doctor also see the hallucinations that level 3 madness survivors see, and you can see them through walls. That means that even if a survivor isn't yelling, their general position is being revealed to you almost constantly. Plus, because the fake doctors give off an aura themselves, it bypasses stuff like distortion since that's based on the actual aura of the survivor and not other things. No matter what kind of stealth a survivor takes, you will find them. So yeah, put that on the list of things Doctor can use to look at you. Atop all this, madness skill checks show up 100% of the time. That said, this is a bit redundant. Why? Well, because when a survivor is level 3, they aren't able to do most things. Like, they aren't able to heal each other or themselves, work on any generators, sabotage any hooks, search any chests, cleanse any totems, or use any items they might have in their inventory. Say, that sounds familiar. Yeah, that's right. Level 3 Madness is incapacitated, but even more fucked up, making Doctor technically the most intense source of incapacitated in the entire game. In other words, if you're at level 3 Madness, you are grounded. So, if level 3 RFK brainworms is that big of a brick wall, how do survivors even deal with it? Well, when at level 3, they can attempt to snap out of it. Snap out of it is a personal survivor action. It takes about 12 seconds to perform. Basically, think of it like Deep Wound in terms of how long you have to sit still and deal with it. And for every quadrant completed of your snap out of it bar, you have to perform a skill check. Remember, your chance of madness skill checks is now 100%. If you fail these, you scream and revert a chunk of your progress. Fully max your bar out though, and you revert back to level 1 madness. There is no way to completely remove your madness, so have fun. When a survivor is at level 3, they will usually need to get right to snapping out of it when they aren't in a chase, meaning that someone basically can't do shit until they find 12 seconds to calm down. Madness, at the end of the day, does a lot at once. It makes people easier to find, makes working on generators harder or completely impossible, and forces them to waste their time. There will be even more complexities to Madness when we talk about add-ons, but I will save that for later. But even with that aside, this is a lot to take in. Between 2 abilities, a context action for survivors, and the most complex status effect in the game, you can understand there's a lot to absorb when it comes to Doc. I would say if I had to simplify an explanation of Doctor, I would put it like this. As the Doc, you have 2 blasts. One big, one small. They make survivors progressively worse and worse at important things until they can't do said things at all, and force them to give away where they are. That ignores a lot of nuance, but it's the best I can do to compress the man's kit into something simple to keep in mind. Oh, fuck, I just realized that I had spent a whole 12 minutes trying to explain how Doctor works and spent 0 minutes talking about how I personally play him. Dude is just so mechanically rich that I spent my usual wax poetic moments talking about skill checks. Anywho, Doctor was a killer I sorta steered away from. Not because I was bad at him, but because I didn't really get what he did. I just sorta blasted people, got kills, and said, I guess he's alright. But now that I know how he works, he's just a lot more fun. Who would have known? Being able to create moments where people can't interact with the world around them is just generally great. It makes Doctor unique in that zapping people out in the open is less effective than zapping people near interactables. Honestly, I just keep blasting people no matter what they're doing. Even if they're at max, I can kind of disorient them. I'm gonna be real, I tend to just do this because I get in the habit of zapping people when I should just be bonking them. I'm easily amused that I can hit my shots and I just keep doing it. I don't know how to explain it, it's just fun to make people scream for no reason. I think the reason I come back to Doctor now and again, even before I knew exactly how he worked, is the aforementioned insane amount of spotting and tracking potential he has. I tend to bring at least one aura reading perk with me per match in this game, and sure, it doesn't help to bring one with Doctor, but I don't have to. I am the aura reading perk. If I play one too many games where someone is dead set on being hidden the whole match, I just play Doctor and everything becomes better. I don't have a deep relationship to the Doc, but he is an amazing change of pace. I just hate his stupid laugh. Wait, hold on, I'm reading the wiki for anything I missed, and it turns out Static Blast and Shock Therapy both remove Oblivious from survivors? Why? Is there a reason for this? I don't know, man. I'm gonna get the fuck out of here and talk about some perks. Monitor and Abuse is a perk that makes your terror radius hard to read. When outside of a chase, your terror radius is 8 meters smaller, meaning that while you aren't completely undetectable, you are going to be generally harder to find when you're walking around looking for people. When inside of a chase, your terror radius not only returns to its base size, but also gains 8 meters of range on top of this, meaning that when in a chase, you will be extremely loud and noticeable. Some people would call this part of the perk a downside, but I wouldn't go that far. Having a terror radius that fluctuates between pretty small and silly immense means that you can be stealthy in your approach while still using terror radius perks effectively while chasing. And even without perk synergies in mind, you can take advantage of the fact that people without a degree in detecting terror radius intensity are going to be very confused by you being anywhere but nowhere. Also, I mean, using it on Doctor means finding people and using your Psycho Rays to hit a huge portion of the map all at once while still having capacity for stealth, which is nice. Electricity. Overcharge is a generator kicking perk that sets a trap on the gen you smacked. It lasts until a survivor interacts with said trap, which causes a very mean skill check to appear with a super slim success zone. If the survivor completes it, crisis averted, generator is normal again. If they miss it though, they will be hit with 4% shaved off of said generator's progress as it blows up and causes a loud noise notification. Meaning it basically does almost as much damage as a kick, and acts as an alarm for yourself. This is only one aspect of this perk, and even if people are good at dealing with the horrible skill check, they gotta hustle to deal with it because every second that generator isn't being touched is a moment where the generator is being actively sapped of its progress. Going from a measly 85% regression rate to a somewhat troublesome 130. If you were around in the pre-nerf Call of Brine days, you might consider this pretty whatever. I would say that despite not being close to how that foul thing used to work, that added regression rate can turn a basically done generator into a lightly touched one with enough focus from you. Something to mention is that this ability has effectively zero cooldown. Like, if you set it on one generator and damage another, the trap gets moved from the previous generator to the new one. And after it gets set off, you can reset it with a simple damage action. Compared to other gen hate perks, this one is less about volume of damage and more about being a bit of generator regression and a bit of survivor trap all in one that you can apply over and over again. It's also not exactly meta these days, so people might not expect it.
One drop.
Oh! Overwhelming presence. More like underwhelming presence. I don't even think this perk is bad, I just wanted to make that joke. Overwhelming makes everyone within your terror radius suffer from inefficiency, meaning that when they use an item, it depletes at a much higher rate. That means any item. You can mosey on up to a generator mid-repair, and someone's toolbox economy is suddenly off by a moment or two. Same with health kits when someone is trying to heal right under your nose. People trying to get close and use a cheesy flashlight save will find their batteries draining faster. And hell, keys and maps will burn quickly too, but they have enough to deal with. A lot of people, and I mean a lot of people, write this perk off because it gives very little feedback to the killer when it's working. But if you have played as a survivor against this perk, you might be able to appreciate how annoying it can be. You could be slowly destroying someone's toolbox, and you won't really know what's happening, which means this perk is genuinely good. You just have no way to know if you got value out of it. My best advice with this is trust it. Genuinely just trust this perk is doing its thing. Because unless survivors just aren't using their items for some reason, this is bound to affect somebody. You might scare someone from using their item while in your radius, and it might catch the people who don't care off guard with how fast their item is gobbled up. Doctor's add-ons have that hair tuft problem where there are more iterations and copies of add-ons than you could reasonably put into a build at a time. That aside, each food group of Doctor add-on is really neat, and plenty make your madness effect into an even more confusing and complex beast. The Maple Knight is a training add-on that shows you the exact range and shape of your shock therapy radius. Some might think this is redundant because sending out a shock already visualizes the radius pretty well, but I would argue that the Knight can be great for not having those moments where you are second-guessing yourself about if a shock will actually hit someone. With this, you can wait until you are perfectly in range and avoid wasting your energy for a zap that wouldn't do anything. Is it quintessential? Not at all. You can run without it very easily. It is great for learning Doctor and playing around some of the more obtuse add-ons though. And you shouldn't be afraid to try it out. Just don't get too reliant on it. Because learning intuition with Doctor's power can mean hitting way more people through walls and such.
Oh my god! Okay, it's happening! Everybody stay calm!
What's the procedure, everyone? What's the procedure?
Stay calm!
The procedure document add-ons are very much stacked with information and flavor, but to simplify it a bit, each document has two things it does: a stat boost and a madness effect. I will do my best to keep these brief, but you know me. Calm's stat benefit is that it causes your terror radius to do a bit of a monitor and abuse thing. When your static blast is on cooldown, you are stealthier due to a smaller radius. And when your static blast is off cooldown, it is completely humongous. This stacks with Monbuse, by the way, so you could be super duper sneaky while still having the capacity to be super duper blasty. The madness effect is one that gives survivors a much worse time trying to understand when you're approaching. Like, even with all this terror radius fuckery, you still have an effect that makes it even harder to realize where you are. In Madness 2, survivors will hear a distant terror radius coming and going. It is never consistent and has a sort of sliding timer of when you might hear it as a survivor, so if you're the type of person to leave a generator and hit up a locker the moment a terror radius shows up, bad news for you, it might be fake. At level 3, this becomes even worse. It makes the distant sound of Doctor constant, meaning that people in level 3 have to assume they're at least a little bit close to you at all times. These effects let you be sneaky as the Doctor without needing to outright sacrifice your terror radius with something like undetectable, which is pretty smart design in my eyes. You could stack two documents of the same type to get even more value out of the stat boost. That would technically be good, but it also might be a bit of a waste. You could be stacking the amount that the stat buff would give, but it would not stack anything for your madness effect. You are encouraged to take two different folders with you and not just two of them, which makes the fact that some of these documents have 3 levels so much more fucked. Like, why? Order is probably my favorite Doctor folder. All of them are super neat, but you'll see why I like it in a sec. Stat boost wise, it makes your static blast cooldown a bit shorter. 6 seconds out of a whole minute isn't a ton, but every moment of your ability being off cooldown is one where you can be blasting, so even small victories like that are nice. That isn't the big thing that Order does, though. Order has what I would consider the most disruptive madness effect out of any Doctor add-on: illusory palettes. At any level of madness, even level 1, palettes will start appearing in place of broken ones. Specifically broken ones, you gotta break them. But once they're up, they are one of the most mind-bending things for a survivor to deal with in a chase with Doctor. A fake pallet is only distinguished by a few debris on the ground of pallet past. If you aren't looking for those though, illusory pallets are visually identical to regular ones. They can spawn upright or already dropped, and when a survivor gets close to one, it disappears, leaving the survivor completely confuzzled. A bad choice. If a survivor is able to remember what planks of wood have been used, or is just able to keep their head about them if a pallet turns out to be a dumb fake pallet for idiots, this becomes ever so slightly less useful. But having another thing in general to confuse survivors with is great. Remember, a survivor can never go back below level 1 madness, meaning that if everyone is mad, everyone is going to come across these pallets in one way or another for the rest of the match. Not even Windows of Opportunity differentiates them. Only the Doctor can tell at a glance because fake pallets are all white and glowy through walls. I love making survivors second guess things, and having a passively spawning set of illusions is just super fun to mess around with. You can act out being afraid of a pallet and give someone a false sense of security, or you can run at a real one as if it were fake and make people assume that they have to keep running. Overall, just fun as hell. Most unique folder by far, at least in my opinion. The electrodes are thankfully somewhat more simple to talk about. They all extend the range of your basic ability by a certain amount, the green and most powerful one extending your ability by 4 meters. I don't think it makes it wider, but it at least stretches your cone forward. Not only is this good for not having to get as close to places to check on them with shock therapy, it is also amazing for people who just like spamming shocks mid-chase. Usually you kinda have to hold your tongue while going after someone until they get in the perfect spot to be blasted. Now you can be a lot more aggressive, sending loony beams at anyone even if they're in the next tile set over. It makes Doctor able to cover more ground in general on top of making zaps easier to connect. It is fantastic in any build you might make.
Behind me, Doctor! Jawohl! Charge me! Ja! I am the Overmensch! Left! Jawohl! I'm coming! I'm coming!
I'm sorry. Discipline is a pretty scary document. For the stat increase part of this add-on, that time between sending out a shock therapy and it actually zapping gets a split second shorter, meaning you can catch people in quick draw situations when you wouldn't have been able to otherwise. Overall, great for aggressive doctors who shock and chase often. The madness effect kinda goes in hand with that aggression. Basically, when someone is both in level 2 and in a chase with you, they will hear your terror radius at full blast no matter where they are compared to you. And on top of that, they'll have a red stain behind them. You know, the red glow in front of killers to show where they're facing? This is on the survivor now. This false red stain can be seen by you as the killer as well. And you can track people off of where you see them projecting light. I don't think there's anything in any other killer's kit that lets you see something like this, so that's damn unique. It makes survivors easier to find and also makes them super duper paranoid. Even sticks around 6 whole seconds after you lose someone, so they might keep running thinking you're right behind them still. Even if they don't run, they'll be super easy to find because they will be projecting mood lighting wherever they go. In level 3, this gets even more fucked up and evil, causing the survivor to have both the red stain and full blast terror radius in effect no matter how far away they are from you. They could be in New York, and you could be in Orlando, and they would still hear you as if you were right behind them. This means that if someone isn't paying great attention, you can sneak up on them as if you had no terror radius at all, on account of scary.wav blasting in their ears. If Calm is about making survivors worried about when you're going to show up, Discipline is about making them unable to know if a chase is starting or over. Use both together for a horrible audio experience.
We have come for your nectar.
Restraint is the Finding People folder. First of all, when someone's madness increases by a tier, you can see them through walls for 3 seconds. This is not as useful if someone is far away and causing a big ping already, but it's very useful if you're close by and zap them through a wall. Suddenly, the way they are headed is much less of a mystery, especially if you have Lethal Pursuer. The madness part of this sandwich makes illusory doctors last 6 seconds longer. That alone is nothing special. What makes this very nice is that you can see the afflicted survivor's doctors through walls, even if said survivor is only in level 2 madness. What was once a high time devotion payoff becomes a mid-game anytime ability. You can intuit where a survivor is based on the positions of your funny fake friends. Plus, this enables a really funny playstyle where you use Insidious to become undetectable, making you undistinguishable from a normal idle hallucination. It's super funny to make this work, and there are videos out there of people using this to great effect. I am not one of them, but one day I swear I will make this happen.
Oh, just thinking about Perk and I just wish I had sweet and
Interview tape turns your therapy cone into a long and thin beam of pure psychology. You will have way less width to deal with, but you will be able to chip at people's sanity from an impressive distance. Seriously, if you put the diode on this, it stretches so damn far. You gotta be more careful when trying to ding people close range, as you will have much less leeway given that survivors can swerve out of the way of your brain blasts. But places like long hallways and intense chokes become horrible to dodge zaps within. Generators can become quickly unsafe from a ridiculous set of phases. If you need a change of pace, absolutely pick this thing up. It's weirdly practical, and it's just a wonderful side grade that makes Doctor way more of a ranged threat.
no, Mr. Simpson, don't take your anger out on me. Get back, Mr. Simpson, no! Dramatization may not have happened.
Scrapped tape is... Okay, so you know how interview tape makes your cone a beam? Scrapped tape makes it a donut, a ring, a torus. Out of all the shapes, this is one of the weirdest they could have chosen. This creates a zone for your zap that is wider and a bit longer than normal, but also it has a massive blind spot right in the middle. That sounds bad, right? Well, it sort of is. but not if you're a psycho like me who enjoys it. Seriously, I have gotten so used to this ring that I can make it work pretty consistently. Sometimes more consistently than the cone. You can still hit people in front of you at the end of your ring, which can catch people at the exact right time. But on top of that, you have these side zones way to the edge of your blast that can hit people in small straightaways without giving them a chance to breathe. It's sort of hard for me to describe what the ring does without feeling like I'm sort of describing a normal cone but worse. But legitimately, I love the ring. It covers a deceptively big space, and can hit many people in a different way than cone can. You can also make people double back into you to avoid a brain blast if they are silly. Also, you can still extend its range with Electrode. It makes even more of a blind spot, but it's still pretty funny. Oh, also you can do a really cool thing. If you use both tapes, you actually get both shapes at once. A big long beam and a nice ring at the starting point. It still has blind spots, but way less than normal ring, and you get the best of both worlds. After all, length is only half the battle.
My boy.
Iridescent King is a value pack of every single madness effect at once. Yeah, Distant Terror, Close Terror, Visible Doctors, and Fake Palettes, all in one. It's all the madness effects, but none of the stat boosts, so if you're looking to use a document with this for its stat boost, you could make it work, but it might be a tad redundant as the insanity effect would kinda go to waste. That said, I love putting this on when I'm using something like a tape or electrode. Being able to turn survivors into a total soup of sensory overload is quite nice. Dealing with one of these effects is hard. Dealing with all of them is completely evil.
Hey! Hey! Don't touch me!
Iridescent Queen is probably the most unique add-on Doctor has, and like most of Doctor's add-ons are pretty damn unique, so that's saying something. When you equip this thing, it turns your madness into a sort of transmittable disease? Okay, so when you hit a survivor with either shock therapy or static blast, and they aren't within 4 meters of another survivor when it happens, you also place a sort of static charge on them. When this survivor comes within 4 meters of a different survivor, said charge will blow up and cause a little shock therapy effect in a tiny radius, using up said charge for both people if the other target has one. This means you can turn survivors into traps themselves, making interacting so much more of a risk if everyone has a case of the vapors. Doctor already has 2 great options for getting people crazy, but having a third way of doing so that just happens automatically, inflicts 0.5 madness, and can't be avoided without total isolation, that is a whole new kind of brutal. I love this thing so much. It's powerful as hell, but I think it's so much of an X factor that it's kind of fun for everyone involved. Or maybe I'm a sadist and a masochist, who knows. Doctor has a lot going for him, huh? I feel like this is one of the few times where breaking down a killer ability didn't make it any less complex. Doctor is just complicated. And I know that isn't everyone's cup of tea, but I adore complexity in killers. I feel like I have the opposite feeling a lot of other people do. I enjoy when a killer has a simple ability with only a few things to keep in mind. It's neat. But I love when a killer is absolutely saturated in new things to learn and understand. Not in the way of tech or special glitches, but more in terms of them having so many little moving parts to their big machine to keep track of. Myers kinda had this, but I could describe him in a sentence. Doctor is the first killer to be so full of things that some of my friends main Doctor and didn't even know about some of the stuff when I told them about it. Hell, most of this was news to me, but I kinda like that. You know, knowledge is power.